Why does the soul flee captivity, only to tremble before the burning mountain of Sinai? There, terrified humanity faced a cosmic fire, receiving not just rules, but a map of existence. He offered a path to inner sacredness through clean rituals, quiet altars, and deep devotion. Here lay the temple where divine light rests, yet even near the sacred human hearts falter. When two priests brought unauthorized fire, they burned. A dark lesson was etched in bone. To encounter the ultimate reality is a terrifying and fragile thing. Piece by piece, the ancient tribe was organized, mapping order onto the chaos of their souls. Their leaders were cleansed, their guilt washed away with the divine center anchoring everything. God lived right among them, guiding their fragile steps through the shifting sands of life. Suddenly the great cloud rises, horns echo. The long rest is over. The journey inward begins. Out in the barren wastes of Sinai under the silver glow of the second new moon, since leaving Egypt behind, a holy whisper echoed inside the mysterious tent of meeting. Amidst the deep silence of the sanctuary, the Lord commanded Moses to count the people. He ordered a complete census of the assembly, tracking every single family and bloodline. Record every young man 20 years and older who was ready to fight in the army. Hearing this divine order, Moses and his brother prepared the scrolls, but they would not work alone. A prominent leader from each branch of the family was chosen to help gather the names. These were respected elders selected by God. From Reuben came Eliezer the son of Shadur. From Simeon, Shelumiel, son of Zurishaddai. From Judah, Nahshon, son of Amminadab. From Issachar, Nathanael, son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab, son of Helon. From Joseph's sons, Elishama, son of Ammihud for Ephraim, and Gamaliel, son of Pedazur for Manasseh. For Benjamin, Abidan, son of Gideoni. For Dan, Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai. For Asher, Pagiel. For Gad, Eliasaph, son of Reuel. And for Naphtali, Ahira, son of Enan. These tribal chiefs were summoned, chosen to stand beside Moses and Aaron during this monumental military census of the nation. On the first day of the second month, the entire community gathered together by their ancestral houses. Scrolls were unrolled and names registered. Every able-bodied adult male, fit to serve in the Lord's great army, stepped forward. House by house, name by name, they marched forward in obedience to the Lord. Reuben, the firstborn, was counted with 46,500 men. Simeon numbered 59,300. From Gad came 45,650 soldiers. Judah, massive and mighty, stood ready with 74,600. Issachar offered 54,400. Zebulun, 57,400. From Joseph's line, Ephraim brought forward 40,500, and Manasseh 32,200. Benjamin, beloved son of Jacob's right hand, brought 35,400. Daniel counted 62,700. Asher 41,500, and Naphtali 53,400. So the sons of Israel were tallied, every warrior by his family, every tribe by its power. Moses and Aaron, with the 12 noble chiefs, wrote down each name beneath the open sky. The total of all the men ready to march for war was 603,550. Yet the tribe of Levi was excluded from this count, for the Lord had commanded, "Do not register the Levites, nor add them to the army. They are set apart for a different destiny. They must guard and carry the sanctuary of the testimony, the sacred dwelling of the divine among humanity." Their duty was to transport its curtains, its holy vessels, and its frames. They would protect the ark, serve the presence, and camp closely around it. When the cloud rose, they took it down. When it rested, they set it up. If any unauthorized person dared draw close to the sacred dwelling, any outsider faced death. The rest of Israel was to camp by their tribes, each under their own banner aligned with their identity. But the inner guardians would form a circle around this sanctuary, a shield of spirit. so that wrath would not destroy the fragile community. They were sworn to watch over the sacred tabernacle, protecting the dwelling of Yahweh Elohim. And the children of Israel did all that Yahweh had commanded Moses. Exactly as instructed, they obeyed. In the quiet of the empty desert, where sands whispered under the morning wind, Yahweh spoke again to Moses and Aaron. From inside the tent of meeting, his command echoed with clear, deep purpose. They were not to wander as scattered fragments, but to encamp in sacred order, each under their own standard by their father's house. Around the dwelling of Elohim, they would assemble not in chaos, but in sacred symmetry, like a psyche structured by divine design. To the east, where dawn begins and light first touches the earth, Judah's banner was raised. Beneath stood Nashon, son of Amminadab, commanding 74,600 men. Beside Judah, the tribe of Issachar pitched camp, led by Nethanel Zuar's son, with 54,400. Then Zebulun, led by Prince Eliab, son of Helon, leading 57,400. In all the division of Judah facing the day, rising sun numbered 186,400. They were to be the first to move out the vanguard of the march. Southward, Reuben's banner was raised. Elizur, son of Shadur, commanded 46,500. Beside him stood Simeon under Shelumiel, son of Zurishaddai, with 59,300. Then Gad, led by Eliasaph, Ruel's son, with 45,650. This southern camp, under the flag of Reuben, numbered 151,450. They were to march second, marching right behind Judah. In the very heart of the procession, the Levites carried the tent of meeting, cocooned in sacred space, just as they camped around the sacred, so they marched steeped in reverence, with absolute focus protecting the holy center at the heart of their ranks. To the west, Ephraim's banner rose against the twilight sky. Elishama, son of Ammihud, led 40,500. Beside him camped Manasseh under Gamaliel, son of Pedazur, bringing 32,200. Next was Benjamin, led by Abidan, son of Gideoni, with 35,400. Ephraim's host, carrying the standard of Joseph's house, numbered 108,100. They were to march third, guarding the backside of the sacred place. To the north, under dark skies, stood the banner of Dan. Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai, led 62,700. At his side stood Asher under Pagiel, son of Akron, with 41,500. Then Naphtali under Ahira, son of Enan, brought 53,400. This northern camp under Dan numbered 157,600. They marched last, guarding the back of the people as they pushed through dust and wilderness. So the tribes stood in deep symmetry, north, south, east, and west, keeping distance around the tabernacle of Yahweh. Every part of the mind knew its place. At the center stood the Levites, carrying the sacred weight, guarding the spark that burned within the darkness. And all the total of those fit for battle, not counting the Levites, was 603,550. The Levites were left uncounted outside the armies, just as Yahweh commanded Moses. Their true destiny was not war, but devotion. So the children of Israel did everything Yahweh commanded. Aligned with their soul, they camped. Why do we build walls around the things we fear to lose? Ancient families marched, moving in precise order, each claiming their specific spot beneath the banners of their ancestors. High upon the silent slopes of Sinai, the divine spoke to Moses amid a terrifying sacred quiet. The lineages of Aaron and Moses were recorded names carved into our shared spiritual history, the blueprint of sacred leadership. From Aaron came 4 sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. They were anointed with holy oil to serve. Yet an inner fire, dangerous and unauthorized, flared from their hands, and they were consumed instantly before the very presence they sought, out in the desert. Their legacy vanished in silence, leaving only Eleazar and Ithamar behind, to serve beside their grieving father. Then came a new command, heavy with divine intent. Summon the tribe of Levi. Present them to Aaron the priest, to assist him in his duties. These men of Levi were not called to be soldiers, but protectors of the sacred boundary. They carried the heavy burden of the tabernacle, safeguarding its sacred vessels from common hands. They stood as a shield for the people, ensuring no one crossed the line into danger. The Creator declared, "They belong to me, a special gift, taken instead of Israel's firstborn sons. I claim the Levites. Every firstborn belongs to me ever since that fateful night in Egypt, when I spared both your families and your flocks. They are mine. I am the Lord." So Moses began the census, counting every male Levite from a single month old and upward. The tribe split into 3 ancestral branches: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. From Gershon came Libni and Shimei. Their clan numbered 7,500, pitching their tents to the west, right behind the tabernacle. Led by Eliasaph, their solemn duty was to guard the tent itself, the heavy outer coverings, the screens, curtains, and ropes. The descendants of Kohath numbered 8,600, carrying a far heavier weight, and they set up camp to the south. Elizaphan was their leader. To their hands was given the care of the ark, the golden table, the lampstand, and the altars, along with the sacred vessels of worship. They carried the things no ordinary hand could ever touch. Above them all stood Eleazar, son of the high priest, overseeing the sanctuary guard. The final branch, the descendants of Merari, came from the lines of Mali and Mushi. Their clans were 6,200 strong, making camp on the northern side. Led by Zuriel, their duty was the literal framework of the sanctuary. The wooden boards, heavy crossbars, pillars, sockets, and all the structural gear, including the surrounding courtyard posts and ropes. But on the eastern side, facing the sunrise, camped Moses, Aaron, and the priests. They stood as the ultimate buffer, protecting the holy place for the entire nation. Any unauthorized intruder would face instant death because the raw power of the divine demands absolute reverence. In total, the Levite males from infants to elders numbered 22,000. Then came another command: count every firstborn male throughout the entire nation of Israel. Moses carried out the census, finding 22,273 firstborn sons. The Creator declared, "Swap the Levites for those firstborn sons, and their flocks for the people's animals. They belong to me." But 273 firstborn boys were left without a Levite substitute. For them, a ransom was required, 5 silver pieces per person, based on the holy sanctuary standard. Moses gathered the silver, 1,365 pieces, and handed it over to the priests as commanded. The Levites became a living shield, a human barrier, standing in the shadow of Sinai, forever bound to guard the dwelling of the Most High. Out in the vast desert beneath the looming divine cloud, the Creator spoke once more, ordering Moses and Aaron to tally the sons of Kohath, another crucial branch of Levi, a sacred bloodline. Why were only those aged 30 to 50 chosen to serve in the holy tent? They were counted not to fight wars, but to bear the heavy weight of holiness. This was no conquest. It demanded pure reverence. Their sole duty was to carry the most sacred mystery, the Holy of Holies. When the camp packed to move, only Aaron and his sons were permitted to enter the sanctuary first. They would veil the Ark of the Testimony, concealing it beneath a protective cover of azure hide. Then they spread a deep blue cloth over everything, carefully sliding the carrying poles into place. Next, across the table of the presence, they draped blue cloth, arranging the sacred dishes, spoons, and bowls. With the bowls for offerings and chalices for libations, the bread of the presence remained. It stood there unmoved even on the march. Next, a crimson cloth was spread, and over it, the azure hide inserting the carrying poles. Then came the golden lampstand with its burning lights, its vessels, oil jars, and wick trimmers. All was wrapped in blue and hidden in azure hide, to be carried on a wooden bar. The golden altar, too, was wrapped and shielded in holy coverings. Every vessel of service and instrument of worship was packed away to rest on the Kohathites' shoulders, never touched by them. Only Aaron's sons could pack and prepare these holy things. The Kohathites carried them, but could never touch them, or they would die. This duty was terrifyingly grave. These were the burdens of the Kohathite clan, watched over by Eleazar the priest, Aaron's son, who held ultimate charge of the oil for the lamp, the fragrant incense, the grain offerings, and the anointing oil. The entire tabernacle and everything inside it fell under his care. Yahweh warned Moses and Aaron, "Do not let this clan of Kohathites be wiped out from among the Levites. Give every man his own duty and burden, so they will live and not perish when they approach these holy things. They must never look upon the sacred vessels even while they are being covered, lest the very holiness that purifies also consumes them." Then Yahweh told Moses to register the clan of Gershon, also those from 30 to 50 years old, who were called to serve. Their task was the fabric of the sanctuary, the outer coverings and veils, the entrance curtains, the large draperies of the courtyard, the gate screen, and the ropes that tied everything securely together. Under the direction of Ithamar, Aaron's son, the Gershonites would carry the structures that shielded and enclosed God's dwelling. Every task and physical movement followed Aaron's direct orders. Absolutely nothing was left to instinct. Every step was pure obedience. The Merari clan was also registered, sorted by family and household. Their service began at 30 and ended at 50. They carried the framework, the very bones of the sanctuary, its boards and crossbars, the pillars, sockets, stakes, and ropes, every single structural piece that held up the sacred dwelling of Yahweh. Every single item was logged by name, its physical weight resting on the shoulders of men, consecrated not by power, but by calling. Ithamar supervised them too, directing every load and task. So Moses and Aaron, alongside the leaders of the congregation, assembled the Levites by family. The Kohathites were counted, totaling 2,750. The Gershonites, 2,630. The Merarites, 3,200. Every male from 30 to 50 stood ready to serve and carry, each hand-picked by Yahweh himself. In total, the Levites assigned to the tent of appointment numbered 8,580. Every single task, every heavy burden was named and weighed with clear purpose. No one was chosen randomly. No load was distributed without deep meaning. By the word of Yahweh, Moses registered them all, and every man took his post, each to his sacred duty, carrying his unique weight of holiness. Deep in the desert beneath the watching cloud, and in the shadow of the sanctuary, Yahweh spoke once more to Moses, demanding not the raising of banners or the weight of vessels, but the radical cleansing of the camp itself. "Send away," he said, "every soul with leprosy, every soul holding an unclean wound, and anyone marked by the shadow of death, they must be banished from the camp. For my holy presence lives within you and cannot be defiled." So they obeyed, carrying their broken and wounded far beyond the boundaries of their sacred space, into the wilderness where the divine resided. This community was not theirs alone. It was a sacred temple that had to remain pure. Then God spoke of guilt and restoration, addressing the moral wounds of humanity. If any person commits a wrong common to our nature and violates the sacred order once their conscience wakes up to that betrayal, they must confess their fault. Full restitution must be paid to the victim, adding a 20% premium. If the injured party had no family to receive the payment, the debt was paid directly to the divine, handed to the priest alongside an offering for atonement. Every sacred gift, every offering brought by the people belonged to the mediator, who carried the heavy burden of intercession. Then the voice spoke again, and the silence deepened with the heavy weight of hidden secrets. God gave the law of jealousy when trust is broken and agonizing suspicion cannot be solved by evidence. If a husband fears his wife has betrayed him, whether she has actually cheated or not, he must take her before the spiritual guide. The husband had to bring cheap barley, flour, an offering of pure jealousy, lacking oil or sweet incense. For this was no celebration, but a solemn exposure of hidden sin. The priest would stand the accused woman before, the divine unbinding her hair to strip away all defenses. In her hands, he placed the grain of accusation, while holding in his own hand the bitter water that brings a curse. This was no simple drink mixed with dust from the holy floor. It was sacred, yet deeply humbling, becoming a mirror of psychological and divine truth. Then the priest declared the solemn oath, "If no other man has slept with you, if you have remained loyal to your husband, then this water will not harm you. But if you have strayed and another man has entered your private world, may God make you an object of shame and a curse to your community. May your body swell and your fertility wither." And the woman would whisper with trembling lips, "Amen. Amen." The priest would write these curses on a scroll, then dissolve the ink in the water. The woman would drink the bitter potion a draught, that if guilty, would turn into physical agony deep within her. Her physical form would betray her secret, leaving her an outcast in her tribe. But if she were innocent, she would be vindicated, her body free and fertile. This was the ritual of jealousy, a mirror held to the human soul, a reckoning before God when no human eye could see. The husband would remain free from guilt, and the woman, if guilty, would carry her own shame. Thus, purity was guarded not merely in the outer camp, but in the quiet corridors of the psyche. Betrayal could not fester in the dark. Wounded trust was brought into the light before the Creator who sees everything. Through this painful process, inner peace was restored, right where the divine made his home. In the silence between public laws and the daily bustle of the camp, God spoke to Moses, again defining a unique path of profound inner devotion. This was not a universal requirement, but a quiet invitation to offer one's entire self to the Lord. It was the Nazirite vow, a season of absolute devotion, chosen not because of birthright or tribal lineage, but by the deep longing of any man or woman seeking to surrender completely to the divine. If anyone makes this sacred choice, God declared they must abstain from wine and intoxicating drink. They cannot consume grape vinegar, nor even taste the juice of grapes, whether fresh or dried. From seed to skin, from feast to cup, no juice of the vine shall pass their lips. And this profound sacrifice was seen not just in diet, but in how they carried themselves. No razor could touch their head. Their hair grew long and untamed. Is holiness a shield or a prison? This visible mark of Elohim rested on their crown. To master this sacred exile, they had to avoid death even when mourning a parent or watching a beloved sibling slip into silence. They could not cross that boundary. For their vow demanded total detachment, belonging not to human grief, but to Yahweh alone. But if death invaded unexpectedly, shattering their boundary, their head had to be shaved, shearing away the past on the 7th day. On the 8th, 2 turtle doves or pigeons were brought to the priest, one for sin, one to rise. After a guilt offering, every previous day of devotion was lost, erased by contamination. Yet they could start anew. When their season of isolation reached its end, the Nazirite walked to the threshold of the sacred tabernacle bearing gifts of gratitude. A young lamb for the ascent, a ewe for sin, and a ram for peace, alongside perforated cakes of unleavened bread, mixed with rich oil-anointed wafers and their liquid offerings. Before the altar they shaved their long hair, casting this symbol of time into the fire, burning beneath the peace offering. The priest then took the ram's cooked shoulder, a cake and wafer, placing them directly into the hands of the seeker. Together they waved them before Yahweh, a sacred gift reserved for the priest. Only then, with the transition complete, could the Nazirite taste wine once more. This was no empty ceremony. It was a deep journey of sacred restraint and profound spiritual clarity. This is the ancient law of the Nazirite, declared Yahweh, matching the depth of their promise and what their hand is able to bring. No matter how small the gift, their devotion must follow this ancient spiritual design. Once these laws were sent, Yahweh spoke to Moses again, breathing ancient words of blessing. These were not for kings or prophets, but for the priests alone to utter. Speak to Aaron and his sons, instructing them to bless the children of Israel this way. And so the timeless benediction was born, spoken with outstretched hands and glowing faces. May Yahweh bless you and protect you. May Yahweh shine his light upon you and show you grace. May Yahweh lift his countenance toward you and grant you peace. In doing this, they marked the people with the name of Yahweh, and the divine dwelling in fire and mercy would bless them. When Moses finally completed the tabernacle, he anointed the structure with sacred oil, consecrating every hidden corner. He blessed the altar and every single vessel within it, anointing them until the entire space radiated with an ancient, heavy holiness. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of the 12 tribes, who watched over the census of the nation, stepped forward to present their offerings. They brought 6 covered wagons and 12 strong oxen, 1 wagon for every 2 leaders, and an ox for each man. They laid these before the tabernacle as gifts. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Accept these gifts to use them in the daily service of the tent of meeting. Distribute them to the Levites matching their assigned duties." So Moses took the wagons and the oxen, distributing 2 wagons and 4 oxen to the clan of Gershon for their work and 4 wagons with 8 oxen to Merari, who carried the heavier loads under the watchful eye of Ithamar. But to the clan of Kohath, he gave absolutely nothing. Their duty was to carry the most sacred objects directly upon their shoulders. Soon after, the leaders approached once more, bringing gifts to dedicate the altar on the day of its anointing. Yahweh then commanded Moses that each leader must present his gift on a separate day, one after another. On the very first day, Nahshon, representing the tribe of Judah, stepped forward with his offering. Why do we repeat our ancient rituals? Is a silver dish just cold metal in the sand? Or is it a psychological blueprint filled with the rich oil of our deepest hidden desires? Every golden spoon of burning incense is a plea rising from the dark corners of our minds. We offer up our wild, beastly nature, the bull, the ram, the lamb, trying to burn away our guilt. This is a sacrifice for peace, a desperate attempt to tame the inner chaos of our modern souls. The first leader brings his tribute, representing the raw strength of our primary ego-driven drive. On the next day, another part of our psyche steps forward, mirroring the same ancient repeating pattern. Why this exact repetition? Because the human struggle with fear and desire remains unchanged across generations. The golden spoon, the blood of beasts, the search for redemption. Each day repeats the cycle of pain. Another day dawns, and another aspect of our collective soul brings the exact same deep, heavy burden. The same heavy silver of our unconscious fears. The same burning sweet smoke of our daily prayers. The same animal instincts offered to the void, searching for a peace we cannot seem to find. This is our constant cycle. Then yet another fragment of our identity steps up to the altar, bringing the exact same measure of devotion, trying to cure the heavy ache of our internal exile. Day 5, and the march of our internal archetypes continues, desperate to bridge the gap with the sacred. They bring the same cold metal, the same golden hopes, the same desperate cries of our ancestors. A constant ritualistic plea to transcend our human limits and find a sense of true cosmic belonging. Then another part of our mind approaches the temple, offering the exact same price for sanity. It is a mirror image of the others, proving that our psychological wounds are universally shared. On the 7th day, the core of our spiritual willpower arrives, offering the precise same alignment of spirit and flesh, striving to quiet the restless mind. The rhythm goes on. On the 8th day, another voice echoes this deep, repeating desire for wholeness, a perfect echo of devotion, proving that our drive to connect with the divine is never random. On the 9th day, the shadowed, fearful side of our identity presents its heavy, quiet toll. Once more, the silver of grief, the gold of hope, and the blood of our heavy sacrifices. The long line of our fragment itself continues as the 10th archetype makes its own quiet offering. Every single detail matches perfectly, because the language of human suffering and hope is completely universal. The journey toward inner alignment is almost complete. as the 11th voice steps into the sacred light, presenting an identical gift, showing that no part of us can escape this profound spiritual work. Finally, the 12th leader approaches, ready to complete the sacred circle of our inner tribes. He brings his heavy gift, closing the loop on our 12-fold psychological map. He offers the same silver, the same gold, seeking to heal our oldest, deepest psychological wounds. The ritual is finished. When we gather all the scattered fragments of our soul, the inner altar is built. Together, the parts of our mind bring 12 silver vessels representing our collective unconscious, heavy with memory. Each vessel is heavy with the exact, precise weight of our shared human grief and experience. 2,400 units of silver, and 12 golden spoons capturing our most noble burning aspirations. 120 units of gold, a treasure chest of our highest spiritual potential, prepared for the fire. All our animal passions, our fears, and our regrets are gathered together, ready to be fully integrated. We sacrifice our pride, our stubbornness, and our wild impulses, all to find a lasting, sacred peace. This is how we consecrate the temple of the self once our inner world is finally aligned. And when you step into the silent, dark temple of your own mind, you will hear a voice speaking from the place of mercy deep within your resting conscience. Emerging from the dark space between your wildest thoughts, that is where the divine speaks to you. The voice instructs us to light the inner fire when you light the sacred lamps. Let their light shine forward, illuminating the shadows of your own path. Will you listen? Why do we hide from our own light? He lit the lamps to cast a glow across the dark. It was a vessel of hammered gold, shaped from base to blossom, forged to illuminate our deepest shadows, designed after a celestial blueprint. Then a voice broke the silence, demanding an even deeper inner sacrifice. Separate those who must carry the sacred fire, and begin the brutal process of stripping them clean. Sprinkled with purifying waters, they shaved away their outer hair, shedding the old layers of worldly identity. Their clothes were scrubbed, leaving them naked and unburdened. Only then could they step into the light. Next came the physical weight of surrender. A young bull offered alongside pure flour and holy oil. A second beast died for their secret errors. The chosen ones were led toward the silent veil, the meeting place where the entire restless community gathered under the desert heat. As the guardians stood in the dust, the crowd pressed hands upon them, transferring their heaviest burdens. The high priest presented their very bodies, waving them like a living offering to the unseen presence. They were bound to this heavy service. In turn, they laid their hands upon the sacrificial beasts, one bull to clear their internal darkness, the other fully consumed by fire, paying the price of their souls. With their debts cleared, they stood before the priesthood, ready to be offered once more to the sky. Waved before the divine, they were severed from the tribe, cast into a holy kind of exile, no longer belonging to themselves, but completely claimed by the Absolute. Consecrated and raw, they finally crossed the threshold into the dark, silent sanctuary, doing exactly as the cosmic vision demanded. The voice declared these guardians were a divine ransom, a substitute for the firstborn of every family. In the ancient world, the firstborn meant everything. Every womb's first fruit belonged to the divine, marked on that terrifying night when Egypt bled. But instead of claiming every family's future, he took this single dedicated tribe instead. They were a heavy gift to the high priests tasked with keeping the sacred flame alive, standing in the gap for a fragile nation absorbing the friction between human failure and holy perfection, preventing the lethal shock of the Absolute from shattering an unprotected, fragile community. So the leaders and the masses submitted to this complex, redemptive spiritual architecture. The chosen washed away their dust, standing clean in their fresh white linen. Waved before the quiet tabernacle, blood was sprinkled, and their guilt was dissolved. They stepped into the dim interior to begin their dangerous daily liturgy, living out the pattern. But even holy service had its limits. The rule of the sanctuary, only at 25, in the prime of youth and strength, could they carry the heavy golden vessels. But at 50, the labor of youth ended. They had to step back from the physical strain, letting the next generation carry the weight. Yet their wisdom remained. They stood watch at the gates, guarding the threshold they once served, a beautiful model of aging, shifting from restless doing to a quiet, protective presence. Deep in the silent desert of Sinai, exactly 1 year after escaping their heavy bondage in Egypt, a new command came. It was time to remember. The community was ordered to celebrate the Passover on the 14th night of the first month under a vast, cold desert moon. They had to reenact the night of their deliverance, honoring every ancient haunting ritual. Moses spoke, and the camps filled with the smell of roasting lamb, keeping time in the wilderness. But in the dark shadows of the camp, some men stood frozen, cut off from the joy. They had touched death, carrying a corpse, rendering them unclean and exiled from the holy feast. Barred from the meal, they approached their leaders with a desperate question. We performed a duty of love for the dead. Why must we be excluded from God? Why should our grief lock us out of the sacred feast? Moses looked at them hesitant. He told them to wait, searching the silence for an answer to this timeless human ache. What if an ancient ritual was actually mapping your deepest psychological isolation? Yahweh told Moses, if anyone now or later is tainted by the touch of death, or finds themselves lost on a journey far from home, they can still keep the sacred Passover. But they must do so a month later, on the 14th day. At twilight, their solemn meal must be eaten with flat, unleavened bread and bitter, heavy herbs, leaving no scraps until dawn and breaking not a single bone. Every ritual detail of this ancient feast remained binding. But if someone was present, yet chose to ignore this sacred connection, they would be cast out, severed from their tribe for withholding their offering. They would carry their own heavy guilt. This absolute law also applied to the lonely stranger, the outsider living among them. If they wished to join in this ritual of redemption, they must follow the exact same spiritual patterns. One law united the insider and the wanderer alike. When the sacred tabernacle was finally erected, a thick, mysterious cloud descended to cover it. From twilight until dawn, a terrifying pillar of fire glowed above. It became a constant, haunting rhythm. By day, the shroud of cloud, and by night, the burning fire. When that divine cloud finally rose, above the tent the tribe marched forward. Wherever it rested, they paused and pitched their tents. At the divine whisper they walked. At that same whisper they rested. For as long as the shadow hovered over the temple, they did not move. Even if that heavy mist lingered for weeks on end, the people waited. They stood still, guarding the silence of the wilderness. Sometimes the quiet lasted only a few short days, and then at the sudden divine call, they packed up. Whether it vanished at midnight or dissolved in the first light of dawn, they journeyed. Day or night, the moment the signal rose, they followed. Whether that guiding shadow paused for 2 days, a month, or an entire year, they waited, refusing to move until it ascended. Only then did they march. Their entire existence, when to rest and when to wander, was governed by a voice speaking through Moses. The wilderness became a mirror of complete surrender as they learned to walk in lockstep with the unpredictable pulse of the sacred. Then came a new command. Forge 2 sacred trumpets out of pure silver, hammered carefully from a single piece. Their metallic voice would summon the tribe, or signal the departure of the camp. When both horns echoed with a long, steady tone, the whole assembly would rush to the temple entrance. But if only a single note pierced the air, then only the high leaders, the chiefs of the clans, would assemble. Sharp staccato alarms signaled the march. The first alarm commanded the eastern tribes to move. The second summoned the south. The third called the west, and the final warning set the northern camps in motion. These quick, harsh alarms were reserved strictly for travel. When gathering, the congregation, the priests played a smooth, continuous melody, without those jarring, urgent breaks. Only the anointed descendants of Aaron held the right to sound these horns, a law cast in stone for all generations to come. Yahweh also promised that if they ever marched into war against an enemy threatening their land, they must blow these desperate silver alarms, and their Creator would remember them breaking the grip of their oppressors. These horns would also sound during times of intense joy at holy festivals and under the dark of every new moon, rising over their sacred sacrifices to trigger divine memory. Yahweh declared, "I am Yahweh, your Elohim." And so in the spring of the second year, on the 20th day of the second month, the heavy cloud finally began to rise from the sacred tent of witness. The ancient wanderers packed up and left the stark sands of Sinai, watching the shadow settle in the barren wilderness of Paran. This was their first true march, guided step by the voice of God. Leading the great procession was the banner of Judah, marching under Nahshon, son of Amminadab, into the wilderness we still face today. Why do our modern minds still march in these ancient patterns? Issachar followed under Nethanel, then Zebulun led by Eliab, son of Helon. Next, the sacred shelter was dismantled as the Gershonites and Merarites headed out carrying its heavy frame. Behind them marched the banner of Reuben's camp, divided by clans. Eliezer led Reuben's tribe, while Shelumiel, the son of Zurishaddai, commanded Simeon, and Eliasaph led the tribe of Gad. Then came the Kohathites, carrying the holy relics. The sacred tent had to be raised before they even arrived. Then rose the banner of Ephraim, with Elishama, son of Ammihud, leading their massed forces. Behind him marched Manasseh, led by Gamaliel, son of Pedazur, and the tribe of Benjamin, commanded by Abidan, son of Gideoni. Finally, the banner of Dan rose up, serving as the rear guard for the entire march. Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai, led them. Pagiel, son of Okran, led. Asher and Ahira, son of Enan, led Naphtali. This vast was the sacred blueprint for Israel's march, clan by clan, as they journeyed into the unknown. During this, Moses spoke to Hobab, the son of Reuel the Midianite, his father-in-law, saying, "We are marching to the land Yahweh promised to give us. Come with us, and we will share our blessings, for Yahweh has promised good things to Israel." But Hobab answers, "No, I cannot go. I must return to my own home and family." Moses begged him, "Do not abandon us. You know the secrets of this harsh desert. You must be our eyes in the dark. If you guide us, whatever goodness Yahweh pours on us, we will share with you." They marched away from the mountain of Yahweh for 3 long days. The Ark of the Covenant led the way, searching the barren sands to find a safe place for them to rest. And Yahweh's mysterious cloud hung over them by day as they walked away from camp. Whenever the ark moved forward, Moses cried, "Arise, Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered. Let those who hate you scatter before your face." And when the ark finally stopped, he prayed, "Return, O Yahweh, to the tens of thousands of Israel." But soon bitter complaints echoed through the camp. Yahweh heard their dark whispers, and his wrath erupted. A divine fire blazed at the camp's edge, devouring those living on the outskirts. Terrified, the people screamed for Moses. He interceded, and the consuming fire slowly died out. They named that scarred ground Taberah, because Yahweh's burning anger had flared up against them. But the restless crowd craved more, infecting the rest of Israel. They wept aloud, demanding, "Who will give us meat to eat?" Our hearts remember the free fish of Egypt, the sweet melons, onions, and garlic. Now we have nothing but this manna. Our souls are drying up, they complained, because there is absolutely nothing else to look at. Yet this mysterious manna was like small coriander seed, glistening like rare pearls. The crowd would gather it, grinding it with heavy stones or crushing it in mortars, boiling it in pots to bake cakes. It tasted like rich bread cooked in fresh oil. Every night as the silent dew covered the camp, the heavenly bread fell with it. Moses listened to the bitter weeping of every family, each man crying at his tent door. Yahweh's anger burned fiercely, and Moses felt the crushing weight of their despair. He cried out to Yahweh, "Why have you brought this trouble on me? Am I no longer favored? That you dump the burden of these people on my back. Did I give birth to them? Did I father them, that you tell me to carry them in my arms like a crying infant, all the way to the land you promised their ancestors? Where can I get enough meat for this entire crowd? They scream at me, demanding meat to satisfy their hunger. 1. Cannot carry this heavy burden all by myself. It is far too exhausting. If this is my fate, then show me mercy and end my life now. Let me not witness my ruin. Does our own soul not cry out the same? Why do we break under the pressure of our callings? God told Moses to gather 70 trusted elders. These leaders of the people would go to the tent of meeting standing shoulder to shoulder with him. The divine promise to descend and speak, sharing the intense spirit that rested uniquely upon Moses. By placing this spirit on the 70, they would finally share the crushing weight of the people. He would no longer walk alone. Moses then ordered the crowd to purify themselves for tomorrow, for God would give them meat. They had wept, begging for flesh to satisfy their hunger. They cried that Egypt was better. In doing this, they rejected the divine presence, so he would feed them not for 1 day, nor 5, nor 10, nor even 20, but for an entire month until it poured from their nostrils and became utterly sickening. Moses doubted this promise. 600,000 men stood before him. How could this be? Would slaughtering every herd satisfy them? Could they gather all the fish in the deep ocean? God replied, asking if his power had faded. Soon they would see his truth, whether it happens or not. Moses went out and delivered these words to the waiting crowd. He gathered 70 elders and positioned them in a sacred sanctuary. The Lord descended in a cloud to speak, drawing from the Spirit that rested on Moses and placing it onto the 70 elders. When the Spirit touched them, they began to prophesy, though the ecstasy quickly faded. Yet 2 men, Eldad and Medad, had stayed behind in camp, even though they were on the official list. The Spirit fell upon them as well, and they prophesied out in the open. A young runner reported this to Moses. Joshua, his assistant, urged him, "My Lord, you must stop them." But Moses turned to him and answered, "Are you jealous on my behalf? I wish all of God's people were prophets, and that he would pour his Spirit onto everyone." Then Moses and the elders walked back into the camp. Suddenly a divine wind whipped up, driving a massive flock of quail in from the sea, scattering them for miles in every direction, piling them nearly 2 cubits deep on the ground. The hungry crowd frantically gathered the birds all that day, all night, and through the next. Even the slowest gathered 10 massive loads. They spread the meat everywhere to dry in the sun. Yet while the meat was still between their teeth, before they could even swallow, divine fury erupted against their insatiable greed, striking the camp with a devastating, deadly plague. They named that place the Graves of Craving, because they buried those who surrendered to appetite. Their lust became their tomb. From there, the survivors journeyed onward, halting at Hazeroth. Soon Miriam and Aaron began whispering against Moses, targeting his marriage to a foreign Cushite woman. They questioned his authority, asking if the Almighty had spoken only through Moses. Has he not spoken through us as well? The Almighty heard this. Now Moses was incredibly humble, more than any man on the face of the earth. Suddenly God summoned Moses, along with Aaron and Miriam, telling them to meet at the sacred tent. And they did. The Lord descended in a towering pillar of cloud, stood at the entrance, and called them. As they stepped forward, he spoke. "Listen closely to my words. If there is a prophet among you, I reveal myself through visions and speak to them in the quiet shadows of dreams. But that is not so with my servant Moses. He is uniquely faithful in my household. With him, I speak face to face, clearly, not in riddles. He beholds my form. Why were you not afraid to slander my servant Moses?" In fierce anger, the divine presence departed from them. As the holy cloud drifted away, Miriam stood there, her skin diseased, white as snow. Aaron looked at her in horror, seeing the rot. Terrified, he pleaded with Moses, "Please, my Lord, do not punish us for the foolish, arrogant sin we have committed. Do not let her rot like a stillborn whose flesh is already half consumed by decay. Decayed like a stillborn child leaving the womb." Then Moses cried out to Yahweh, "Oh God, please heal her, I beg you." But Yahweh replied, "If her own father had spit in her face, would she not hide in shame for 7 days? Let her be exiled outside the camp for 7 days, and only then can she return." So Miriam was banished, isolated outside the community for 7 days, and the nation halted, refusing to march until she was restored. Afterwards, they departed from Hazeroth, pitching their tents in the vast, silent wilderness of Paran. Yahweh spoke to Moses, commanding, "Send men ahead of you to scout this unknown land of Canaan, which I promised to Israel. Send one respected leader from each of your ancestral tribes, and make sure every man is a prince." So Moses dispatched them into the deep wild of Paran, under Yahweh's divine direction. Each spy was a chief in Israel. These were their names. From Reuben, Shammua, son of Zakur. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hori. From Judah, Caleb, son of Jephunneh. And from the tribe of Issachar, Igal, son of Joseph. From Ephraim, Hosea, son of Nun. From the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, son of Raphu. From Zebulun, Gadiel, son of Sodi. From the line of Joseph, that is the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, son of Susi. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, son of Gamali. Asher, Sethur, son of Michael. From the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, son of Vophsi. The tribe of Gad, Guel, son of Machi. These were the chosen men Moses sent to map the territory, and it was then Moses renamed Hosea, calling him Joshua. He sent them to scout Canaan, instructing them, "Go up through the southern Negev, climb into the rugged hill country, and see what lies out there. Study the people. Are they powerful or defenseless? A massive army or just a few? Observe the soil they live on. Is the territory rich and fertile or barren and harsh? Look at their settlements. Are they vulnerable, unwalled camps, or are they surrounded by massive, fortified strongholds? Is the soil lush or poor? Does the earth offer green forests, or is it bare? Take courage and bring back a sample of the local harvest." It happened to be the season when the first grapes were beginning to ripen, so they crossed over, exploring the vast territory, from the desert of Zin all the way to Rehob, near Lebo Hamath. Journeying through the Negev, they reached Hebron, where the legendary giants, the descendants of Anak, lived. This ancient stronghold had stood 7 years before Egypt's Zoan was built. Entering the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a single branch bearing one massive grape cluster. It took 2 men to carry it, suspended on a pole along with pomegranates and figs. They named that valley Eshcol because of the enormous cluster of grapes they harvested. 40 days later, their dangerous reconnaissance mission was complete. They traveled back to Moses, Aaron, and the entire assembly of Israel, who waited in the shadow of the desert of Paran at Kadesh. They delivered their report to the massive, anxious crowd, displaying the spectacular heavy harvest they had carried back. They reported, "We reached the country where you sent us, and it truly overflows with milk and honey. Here is its spectacular fruit. But the tribes living there are incredibly powerful, and their fortress cities are massive and terrifyingly strong. Worse, we saw the giant Anakim there. The fierce Amalekites control the southern Negev. The Hittites, Hivites, Jebusites, and Amorites control the rugged highlands, while the hostile Canaanites guard the sea and the Jordan Valley." Then Caleb silenced the rising panic before Moses, urging, "We must march up immediately and take the land. We can absolutely conquer it." But the other men who had gone up with him objected, saying, "We cannot attack those people. They are far stronger than we are." And so they spread a whisper of deep terror throughout the entire camp of Israel, warning, "The country we traveled through and surveyed is a hostile place that consumes those who live there. Everyone we encountered was a giant. We saw the Nephilim there, the ancient giants who still rule the shadows of our minds. Why do we shrink? We became like grasshoppers in our own eyes and in theirs too." That night, the entire camp wept, their spirits broken. A bitter wave of resentment spread among them. They turned on their leaders, weeping, "If only we had died back in the land of Egypt, or lay buried in this vast wasteland. Why is God bringing us here? Only to fall by the sword. Our families will be taken. Isn't it safer for us to retreat to Egypt?" They whispered to one another, "Let's choose a new leader and turn back." Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in the dust before the entire trembling assembly. But Joshua and Caleb, two of the brave scouts who had walked the unknown path, tore their clothes in deep grief, standing up to face the entire terrified community. The country we explored is beautiful and good. If the divine is pleased with us, he will guide us safely inside and give us this land flowing with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the giants of that land, for they are defenseless. The protection is gone, and the divine is with us. Fear them not. But the angry mob threatened to stone them. Suddenly, the blinding glory of the Lord appeared at the sacred tent before all the people. And God spoke to Moses, "How long will this people reject me? How long will they refuse to believe, despite all the wonders I have shown them? I will strike them with disease and disinherit them. And I will build from you a much greater, stronger nation than they are." But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "The Egyptians will hear of this, for you rescued us by your mighty power. And they will tell the inhabitants of this land, they have heard that you, Lord, are physically among these people, seen face to face with your protective cloud hovering above, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. If you destroy this people in a single blow, the nations of the earth will say, 'The Lord was unable to lead this people into the land he swore to give them, so he slaughtered them in the wilderness.' So now let your great power be shown, just as you declared. The Lord is slow to anger, rich in faithful love, forgiving iniquity, rebellion, and sin. Yet he will never leave the guilty unpunished, punishing the sins of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Forgive, I pray, the sins of this people through the greatness of your mercy, just as you have pardoned them from Egypt until now." And the Lord replied, "I have forgiven them, as you asked. Yet as surely as I live and my glory fills the earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the wonders I performed in Egypt and the wilderness who tested me, these 10 times and ignored my voice, will ever set foot in the land I promised their fathers. None of those who rejected me will see it. But my servant Caleb has a different spirit. He followed me completely. I will bring him into the land he scouted, and his children will inherit it. Since the enemy is waiting in the valleys, the Lord commanded tomorrow, turn back, head out into the desert toward the Red Sea." Then God spoke to Moses and Aaron, asking, "How long must I endure this rebellious crowd grumbling against me? I have heard the complaints of these people. Tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things you whispered in my ears. In this desert, your corpses shall fall, every single person registered in the census 20 years old and upward, who grumbled against me. You will never enter the land I promised to settle you in, except Caleb and Joshua. But your little ones whom you feared would become plunder, I will bring in. They will know the land you rejected. But as for you, your corpses will fall in this wasteland. Your children will wander as shepherds in the desert. For 40 years you will carry the weight of your betrayal, until your bodies fall cold, left to rot in the desert. 40 years, 1 year for each day you spent exploring the promised land. You will bear your guilt and learn the bitter cost of my rejection. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will surely bring this upon this entire rebellious crowd who have conspired against me. In this harsh wasteland they will meet their end. Here they will die." The scouts whom Moses sent to map out the territory, who came back and infected the whole community with fear. By spreading a dark report about the place, those very men who spread lies, struck down by a sudden plague before the Lord. Yet Joshua and Caleb, the 2 faithful scouts, survived out of everyone who had gone to search the land. And when Moses delivered these heavy words to the children of Israel, they wept in deep despair. At dawn they woke with a desperate plan and headed for the rugged highlands, shouting, "We are ready! We will march to the land the Lord promised, for we admit we sinned." But Moses warned, "Why are you disobeying the Lord again? This effort is doomed to fail. Do not go, because the Lord is not with you, and you will be slaughtered by your foes. The Amalekites and Canaanites are waiting there, and you will fall by the blade. Since you turned your backs on the Lord, he has abandoned you. Still, they defiantly pushed up into the steep mountain pass, even though the sacred Ark of the Covenant and Moses never stirred from the safety of the camp. Suddenly, the ancient enemies who guarded those peaks charged down, striking them mercilessly and chasing them all the way to Hormah. Deep in the wasteland, the Lord spoke to Moses once more, giving him a message for the children of Israel. When you finally cross into the homeland I am giving you and present fire offerings, whether burnt sacrifices, tokens of sacred vows, voluntary gifts, or tributes at the sacred feasts meant to rise as a pleasing aroma to the Lord from your livestock, you must accompany each sacrifice with the proper gifts of grain and wine. The person presenting this tribute must offer 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of oil, and 1/4 of a hin of wine for the drink offering. For a ram, use 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/3 of a hin of oil and 1/3 of a hin of wine for the offering. If you present a young bull, bring 3/10 of an ephah of flour mixed with half a hin of oil, along with half a hin of wine as a drink offering. This is the sacred design for every sacrifice. Whether it is a bull, a ram, a lamb, or a goat, each must be presented with its exact companion offerings of grain and wine. This decree binds both the native-born of the land and the foreigner living among you. There is to be only one standard, for everyone a permanent rule throughout all your generations. The Lord declared that the traveler stands equal before him, the same law, the same justice, applying to every single soul. The Lord spoke to Moses again, saying, "When you enter the land and eat its first harvest, you must present a special gift to the Lord. From the very first batch of dough, dedicate a loaf as a tribute, just as you offer grain from the harvest floor. This remains a duty for all generations." The Lord then spoke of mistakes made in ignorance, when the whole community wanders off course, failing to follow the sacred rules given through Moses. Whether commands from this very day or laws passed down to your children, the entire assembly must sacrifice a young bull as a burnt offering with its proper flour and wine, plus a male goat to clear their guilt. The priest will cleanse the whole community, and they will be forgiven, because the wrong was completely unintentional. This grace covers both the native Israelite and the foreigner living among you. If a single individual sins unknowingly, they must present a 1-year-old female goat to clear their guilt. The priest will make amends and they will be forgiven. The same rule protects the native and the traveler from their unintentional. What if rebellion is a mirror for the defiant soul, citizen or stranger who mocks the sacred law and spurns the calling they are cast out, exiled from the tribe for despising the deep truths, the ultimate voice? Their heavy burden remains. Deep in the desert sands, as the ancient family of Israel rested, they caught a man gathering firewood on the holy day. He was dragged before Moses, Aaron, and the entire tribe. Unsure of his fate, they locked him in dark confinement. Then a cold decree came from Yahweh. The lawbreaker must die. The whole collective of people carried him outside the camp boundaries and stoned him to death, obeying the divine word. After this harsh judgment, Yahweh spoke again, ordering the children of Israel to weave tassels onto the borders of their robes, for generations laced with a single thread of blue as a physical anchor. Every time they looked upon them, they would remember the holy path, recalling the laws of Yahweh. They had to guard their hearts against drifting into self-delusion and chasing their own blind desires, which had led them astray. These fringes were meant to keep them consecrated to their God. "I am Yahweh, your sacred source," he declared, "who rescued you from the darkness of Egypt to guide your souls. I, Yahweh, am your protector." But then a shadow fell. Korah, a prominent Levite, rebelled against Moses, aligning his forces with Dathan and Abiram from the tribe of Reuben, alongside 250 noble, highly respected leaders of immense power and high tribal rank. They gathered to aggressively confront Moses and Aaron, shouting a bitter accusation. "You have gone too far. This entire community is holy, everyone, and God is among us all. Why do you set yourselves above his chosen assembly?" Hearing their betrayal, Moses fell prostrate in the dust. Then rising, he addressed the rebel faction. "Tomorrow Yahweh will reveal who belongs to him. He will draw his chosen one close. So bring your censers, Korah, and all your followers. Place burning coals in them, and offer incense before the presence. The one he selects will be recognized as holy." "You Levites have gone too far." Moses confronted Korah again, asking if it was not enough that God had already set them apart from Israel for holy duties in his sanctuary. He welcomed you close, you and all your Levite brothers. Yet now you demand the priesthood too? This mutiny you lead is actually not against Aaron. It is against Yahweh himself. Moses then summoned Dathan and Abiram, but they flatly refused to come, mockingly claiming he dragged them from a land flowing with milk and honey, only to let them die in this desolate waste. "You never brought us into a promised paradise," they sneered. "Will you blind these people to keep them submissive? We refuse to come." Furious Moses cried out to Yahweh, "Reject their gifts. I have taken absolutely nothing from them, not a single donkey nor hurt a single soul." Then he ordered Korah and his entire group to assemble before Yahweh the very next morning, each man carrying his own burning censer. Aaron would stand there as well. At dawn, Korah and his 250 co-conspirators arrived, igniting their metal pans with smoldering incense, standing defiantly at the entrance of the sacred tent beside Moses and Aaron. Then Korah rallied the entire mob to confront them. Suddenly, the blinding glory of Yahweh appeared to the mass of people, commanding Moses and Aaron, "Stand back from this rebellious crowd, so I can destroy them in a single breath." Instantly, both men fell face down in prayer, crying out, "Creator of all life, if one man rebels, must your fury burn against the entire nation." Yahweh relented slightly, telling Moses to quickly warn the people to pull back from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses then marched with Israel's elders to face Dathan and Abiram directly. He shouted to the crowd, "Run from these evil men! Touch nothing they own, or be destroyed in their rebellion. Like them, we must decide where we stand." They backed away, leaving Dathan and Abiram standing at their tent doors with their families. Then Moses spoke, "This is how you will know Yahweh sent me to perform all these works. If these rebels die peacefully, then Yahweh did not send me. But if Yahweh does something unprecedented, and the earth splits open and drags them down alive into the abyss, along with everything they own, then you will realize these men rejected Yahweh." The moment he stopped speaking, the very earth tore apart, right beneath their feet. The ground gaped wide, swallowing them and their families whole. Everyone aligned with Korah and everything they owned. They fell alive into the dark abyss, and the ground shut over them. The people of Israel scattered in terror, screaming, "Hurry, before it swallows us too!" Then a consuming fire burst from Yahweh, burning up the 250 men offering the incense. Yahweh then told Moses to have Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, gather the bronze burners from the embers, for they had become sacred. Eleazar took them and had them hammered flat to cover the altar. It stood as a permanent warning that no stranger outside Aaron's lineage should ever dare to burn incense before Yahweh, avoiding the dark fate of Korah and his followers. Yet the very next morning, the entire community of Israel began grumbling bitterly against Moses and Aaron, shouting, "You killed Yahweh's own people." But as they crowded together in rebellion, the sacred cloud suddenly blanketed the tabernacle, and Yahweh's brilliant glory appeared. Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Step away from these people immediately, so I can destroy them." Once again, the brothers fell face down. Moses urged Aaron, "Take your censer, put hot coals. From the altar inside, add incense and rush into the crowd to purify them." Divine wrath is unleashed. The plague is already spreading. Aaron did exactly what he was told. He ran straight into the desperate crowd where the disease was cutting people down. He stood directly between the living and the dead with his censer, and the plague halted. Yet 14,700 lay dead, on top of those lost with Korah. Finally, Aaron made his way back to Moses at the door of the sacred tent. The silent killer was finally stopped. Following the horrific aftermath of the rebellion, Yahweh moved to restore order and confirm his chosen order among the sons of Israel. He spoke to Moses, commanding him to collect a wooden staff from every ancestral tribe and to carve the distinct name of each tribal leader upon each rod. Aaron's name was to be inscribed upon the staff of the tribe of Levi. These 12 staffs would stand as a covenant placed inside the tent of meeting before the sacred ark, where Yahweh regularly met with Moses. Inside that holy sanctuary, Yahweh declared that the staff of his chosen servant would miraculously bud. This supernatural sign would finally silence the bitter complaints of a people who remained stubborn despite fire, terrifying plague, and the swallowing earth. Their defiance was relentless, but now Yahweh would offer them proof they could not deny. Moses obeyed Yahweh completely. He collected the 12 wooden staffs from the tribal leaders, including the staff of Aaron, and laid them out before Yahweh inside the sacred tent. At dawn, Moses stepped back into the quiet sanctuary. There, in front of the ark, a miracle awaited him. Aaron's staff, representing the entire house of Levi, had budded. Even more, it had burst into full bloom. Not only that, but it bore ripe almonds. Life exploded from dead wood, buds, blossoms, and fruit. Yahweh had spoken. Moses carried all the dry staffs out to the gathered people of Israel. Every leader took back his staff, witnessing the quiet miracle that had unfolded. The proof was absolute. Then Yahweh commanded Moses, "Bring Aaron's staff back to the ark for safekeeping. Let it stand as a warning to these rebels, so their constant complaints against me will quiet down, saving their lives." And Moses did exactly as commanded. But the terrified Israelites, gripped by a sudden panic, cried out to Moses, "Look, we are doomed. We are dying, all of us. Whoever dares approach the sanctuary of Yahweh dies. Are we all doomed to perish?" They finally understood. Holiness was a dangerous, heavy reality. Yahweh had made his choice absolute and unyielding. The budding almond blossoms of Aaron's staff would remain a silent, haunting testament to both divine authority and mercy. Then Yahweh spoke directly to Aaron, laying the terrifying weight of sacred duty upon him and his entire lineage. They alone would carry the spiritual cost of guarding the holy place, answering for any failure within the priesthood itself. Beside them, the entire tribe of Levi was summoned to help, yet forbidden from ever touching the sacred altar or its vessels, lest they all strike themselves dead. These assistants were given to Aaron as a divine gift, consecrated by Yahweh to watch over the sacred tent. Yet while they guarded the perimeter, only Aaron and his sons could touch the altar or step behind the heavy inner veil. This sacred office was Yahweh's exclusive gift to them. Any unauthorized intruder who dared to cross that threshold would die. Then Yahweh declared how Aaron would be sustained. Every sacred offering, the lifted gifts, the wave offerings, the sacrifices for sin, and guilt brought by the people belonged solely to the priests. This was no ordinary food, but the most holy of holies, eaten only by the priestly men in absolute sanctity. Other gifts, like the waved offerings and the very best of the oil, wine, and grain, could be shared with the priest's household provided they remained ritually clean. Every firstborn, whether human or beast, belonged to Yahweh. But the firstborn of unclean, animals and of mankind, had to be redeemed with silver. Clean animals, however, were offered. Fully their blood dashed on the altar, their fat burned, and their meat given to the priests. For Aaron's family, Yahweh established an unbreakable covenant of salt, a promise that all the sacred contributions of Israel belonged to them. Yet unlike the other tribes, they inherited no land. "I am your portion and your inheritance," Yahweh declared, drawing the priests into a life of absolute, intimate dependence on him. For the Levites, Yahweh set aside the tithes of all Israel. This was their rightful inheritance for their grueling daily service at the city sanctuary. The rest of the Israelites were forbidden from ever approaching the sacred tent again, lest divine anger consume them. Yet even as the Levites collected these tithes from the people, they too had to offer a tenth of that abundance, a tithe of the tithe as a sacred contribution to the Lord. This offering went directly to Aaron, regarded just like fresh grain from the threshing floor or the rich wine from the press. From every gift, the Levites had to dedicate the absolute best and richest portions set apart for Yahweh. Only after the finest portion was given could they enjoy the rest with their families in their homes, for it was their rightful reward for ministering in the sanctuary. But the warning was clear. Never treat the holy as ordinary. Never defile the offerings of Yahweh lest they sin and die. Thus, Yahweh established their sacred roles, duties and provisions protecting the absolute holiness of His presence, honoring the chosen priesthood and ensuring those who served Him were fully sustained by His hand. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, dictating an eternal law of cleansing for the people of Israel. They were to find a rare, flawless red heifer, unblemished and never burdened by a yoke, and deliver it to Eleazar the priest. Outside the community, the animal would be slaughtered before his eyes. Eleazar would then dip his finger in the blood, sprinkling it 7 times toward the entrance of the sacred tent, tying this distant sacrifice back to the holy sanctuary, even though it happened outside the borders. The entire heifer, its hide, flesh, blood, and offal was consumed by fire. Into those flames, cedar, hyssop, and crimson wool were cast, weaving rich layers of meaning into the ash. Once the burning was finished, why must we wash after touching the sacred? Even the priest who burned the heifer had to bathe, remaining unclean until dusk. In this psychological map, a pure man then gathered the ashes, storing them outside the camp, a reserve of ashes kept to prepare them waters of purification. It was a ritual for cleansing the human soul through this act, rendered the collector unclean until evening. How can what defiles us also become our only path to spiritual healing? This ancient law dealt directly with our deepest fear, the corruption of death. Anyone who touched a corpse, a dry bone, or a grave, or sat in the shadow of mourning was declared unclean for 7 days. To be healed, they had to be sprinkled with this bitter water on the 3rd and 7th days. Without this painful cleansing, they remained spiritually contaminated, defiling the inner sanctuary, exiling themselves from the community. The ancient ritual required taking some of the ashes of this heifer and mixing them with living running water in a vessel. A pure soul would dip hyssop into the mixture, sprinkling everything touched by the shadow of death, the dwelling, the vessels, and the people exposed to mortality. This sacred process, done on the 3rd and 7th days, ended with bathing and changing their garments, making them whole by twilight. But ignoring this inner purification when your soul demands it is a grave mistake. It does not just leave us unclean, it corrupts the sacred space within us, bringing heavy consequences. Even the helpers in this ritual, the ones who carry the cleansing water, had to wash, and whoever brushed against it became temporarily unclean. This ancient law reveals a profound, enduring spiritual mystery. A strange paradox where the ashes of a sacrifice made the broken whole while rendering the healer unclean. It exposes the heavy cost of our mortal fears and the divine map provided to restore our true identity. We see this play out as Israel entered the wilderness of Zin, settling in Kadesh. There Miriam, the beloved sister of Moses, died and was buried. Her passing marked the start of a deep psychological crisis for the entire community. As their water dried up, their fragile faith failed, and they assembled to rage against Moses and Aaron, weeping, "If only we had died when our brothers fell before the Lord. Why did you drag us into this wilderness to die, both we and our herds? Why did you make us leave Egypt for this horrific dry desert? There is no food, no life, no grapes, and not even water to drink." Crushed by the heavy burden of their panic, Moses and Aaron fled to the holy tabernacle, falling on their faces. Suddenly, the glorious presence of God appeared. God spoke to Moses, commanding him to take his staff and assemble the angry crowd before them. He was to speak to the silent rock, and it would pour out water, saving them all. Moses grabbed his staff, but the internal conflict was already raging. Standing before the rock, Moses lost his faith. Instead of speaking to the stone, he snapped at the crowd. "Hear me, you rebels! Must we strike water from this rock?" He raised his arm and struck the rock twice. Rivers of water burst forth, quenching their physical thirst. But God spoke to Moses and Aaron in the silence. "Because you did not trust me enough to reveal my holiness before this desperate people, you will not lead them into the promised land." This was the water of Meribah, the water of quarreling where humanity battled its own fear. Yet God proves himself holy. Are you fighting your own wilderness? Moses sent messengers to Edom appealing to a brother to let them pass through their shared exile. Delivered from Egypt, why does our path forward remain blocked? Moses begged Edom for safe passage, pledging to leave their wells, fields, and vineyards untouched. Yet Edom refused, threatening them with the sword. Even when Israel offered to pay for every drop of water they consumed, Edom stood firm. Israel had to turn away, bypassing Edom's borders. The weary congregation journeyed from Kadesh to Mount Hor. There Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, declaring that Aaron's time had come to be gathered to his ancestors. For their disobedience at the waters of Meribah, he was barred from the homeland promised to the children of Israel. Yahweh told Moses to lead Aaron and his son Eleazar up Mount Hor. There, Moses stripped Aaron of his sacred garments, dressing Eleazar to transfer the priesthood. Aaron drew his last breath on the summit. When Moses and Eleazar finally descended, and the people realized Aaron was gone, the whole house of Israel wept for 30 days. Their trek through the wilderness grew increasingly tense and harsh. When the Canaanite king of Arad, ruling the Negev, heard Israel was coming by the Atharim road, he launched an attack. He dragged several Israelites away as captives. In their desperation, Israel made a vow to Yahweh, promising, "If you hand this enemy over to us, we will devote their cities to complete destruction." Yahweh heard Israel's cry, handing the Canaanites over to them, and they wiped out both the people and their cities. They named that place Hormah. From Mount Hor, they set out by the Sea of Reeds road to bypass the territory of Edom. The road was brutal and exhausting, and the people grew deeply impatient. Once again, they spoke out against Elohim and Moses, crying, "Why did you drag us from Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread, no water, and our very soul loathes this miserable light bread." Then Yahweh sent fiery serpents among them. The serpents bit the people, and many in Israel died. Driven by raw terror, the people came to Moses confessing, "We have sinned, for we spoke out against Yahweh and against you. Pray that Yahweh will remove the snakes away." Moses interceded, and Yahweh told him, "Fashion a replica of a fiery serpent and mount it on a pole. Anyone who is bitten and looks upon it will live." So Moses crafted a bronze serpent, raising it high on a pole. If a venomous serpent struck a man and he looked upon the bronze serpent, he survived. Moving forward, they camped in Oboth, then pressed on to Abarim in the desert wastes bordering eastern Moab. They camped along the Zered Valley, then crossed the Arnon, the rugged boundary between Moab and the Amorites. Marching on, they entered lands that Sihon, king of the Amorites, had wrested from Moab. This ancient conquest was recorded in the forgotten scroll of the wars of Yahweh. The rushing waters of the valleys, the torrents of Arnon, and the slopes reaching down to the city of Ar, leaning against the border of Moab. Next, they marched to Beer, the place where Yahweh promised Moses he would gather the people to give them water. There Israel sang this song, "Spring up, O well. Sing of its waters, a well dug by leaders, carved out by nobles with the scepter of the lawgiver and their own staffs." Moving past Matana, Nahaliel, and Bamoth, they reached the valley in Moab's high fields near the peak of Pisgah, overlooking the barren wastes. From there, Israel sent envoys to Sihon, king of the Amorites, asking for safe passage through his territory, promising not to touch fields or vineyards, or drink from their wells, staying strictly on the king's highway. But Sihon refused and mobilized his forces for war. He attacked Israel at Jahaz, but Israel put him to the sword, seizing all his territory from the Arnon to the Jabbok, right up to the Ammonite border. Israel captured all the Amorite cities, including Heshbon, which became Sihon's capital after he took it by force from Moab. An ancient proverb declares, "Come to Heshbon, let it be rebuilt. Why rebuild our own ruin?" Fire once raged from Heshbon, a devastating flame from Sihon, devouring the strongholds of Moab, the high summits of Arnon. Woe to you, Moab! The people of Chemosh are utterly ruined, their children dragged away by Sihon. This unstoppable force pushed onward, claiming territory and striking the Amorites of Jazer, banishing them. Next, they faced the road to Bashan. There, King Og of Bashan mobilized his entire army to fight at Edrei. But the Lord told Moses, "Do not fear, for I have surrendered him, his people, and his land into your hands. Defeat him just as you defeated Sihon." So they struck down Og, his sons, and his entire army, leaving no survivors. And they possessed his land. As the Hebrews camped in the plains of Moab near Jericho, rumors of their conquest reached the Moabite king Balak, son of Zippor. He watched how they crushed the Amorites and fell into deep dread. Moab was paralyzed by their massive, formidable presence. Balak panicked, fearing they would devour his kingdom the way an ox eats grass, and sought spiritual warfare to stop them. He sent envoys to a famous sorcerer named Balaam, son of Beor, living in distant Pethor. The king's message was desperate. A massive horde has emerged from Egypt, blanketing the earth. He begged the seer to place a curse upon them, believing his spiritual decrees held absolute binding power. The elders of Moab and Midian arrived offering riches, but the conflicted prophet urged them to stay, promising to seek the Lord's counsel in the silent darkness. God visited Balaam, questioning him about these strangers. The seer explained, but the Creator warned him strictly, "You must not go with them. Do not curse them, for they are blessed." At dawn, Balaam submitted, telling the rulers that the Lord refused to let him go. Yet the king persisted, sending more powerful nobles with promises of high status and immense rewards. But Balaam countered that even a palace overflowing with gold and silver could not tempt him to disobey. Still, he asked them to wait, seeking another word. In the night, God spoke again, saying, since these men had returned, he could accompany them, but only on one condition. Speak only the words I give you. At sunrise, Balaam saddled his donkey and departed with the noblemen of Moab. But the divine wrath burned because of his hidden motives. An angel blocked the path to stop him. The blind prophet saw nothing, but his donkey saw the messenger. 3 times the animal swerved in terror from the unsheathed blade, and each time Balaam beat her in fury. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, asking why he was striking her. In his blindness, Balaam argued with the beast, as if it were normal, screaming that she mocked him, wishing he had a sword to kill her. Then his spiritual eyes were opened. He saw the warrior standing there with drawn sword in hand. Balaam fell prostrate. The messenger rebuked him, saying, the donkey saved his life. Had she not veered, the blade would have killed him while sparing her. Balaam confessed his blind rebellion, offering to turn back if his path was wrong. The angel allowed him to go, but repeated the warning, speak only the word that I reveal to you. So Balaam went on with the princes of Moab. Balak rushed to the border, demanding to know why the prophet had delayed. Balaam answered that he was here now, but could only speak what God commanded. Together, they traveled to Kiriath-Huzoth, sacrificing cattle and sheep, sharing the feast with the prophet and his leaders. At sunrise, Balak brought Balaam to the high sanctuaries of Baal, looking out over. He looked out over the sprawling camp. From up here, Balak hoped the prophet would find power to damn the Hebrews. But the deeper mystery of this prophet's true path was only just beginning. Balaam stood with King Balak on the wind-swept heights, 7 fresh stone altars built at his command. On each altar a young bull and a ram burned. As heavy smoke climbed from the sacrifices, the prophet walked away alone to a high ridge, seeking God. He told the king to stay by the burning meat while he waited to hear whatever message would come. Deep in the silence, God met Balaam and put words in his mouth. The prophet returned to the king and his gathered lords ready to speak. His eyes scanned the horizon over the endless tents below, and he began his chant. "From Aram Balak called me," he said. "From the eastern hills. He begged me to ruin Jacob and tear down Israel. But how can I curse those whom God has favored? How can I condemn what is holy?" Standing on the high stones, Balaam spoke of a nation that lives apart, completely unique, outside the reach of common empires. Their soul was different. He could not even count their endless numbers. "Let my final days be like theirs," the prophet whispered. The king grew furious. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I brought you here to destroy my foes, but you have only given them favor." Balaam answered, "Must I not? Speak only the words God gives me." Still hoping to twist fate, Balak dragged him to a new spot, the high watchman's field on the peak of Pisgah. Once more, Balaam ordered 7 altars built, sacrificing 7 bulls and 7 rams. Again he walked off alone, and again God met him, putting a new message in his soul. He returned, and the anxious king asked, "What did God say?" The prophet cried out, "God is not a man that he should go back on his word or change his mind. Does he speak and not follow through? Look, I was ordered to bless, and he has given grace. I cannot take it back. No ruin waits for Jacob, no trouble for Israel, because the Lord their God is right there, and the roar of a king is with them. He rescued them from Egypt with the sheer strength of a wild ox. No dark magic or spells can touch Israel. The whole world will look at these people and say, 'Look what God has done.'" He saw a people rising like a fierce lion, refusing to rest until they conquer, tasting absolute victory. The terrified king pleaded, "If you will, not ruin them at least. Stop blessing them." But Balaam shook his head. "Did I not warn you? I can only do what the Lord commands." Still desperate, the king led him to a third peak, the top of Peor, looking out over the desert. Once more the prophet demanded 7 altars, 7 bulls and 7 rams. Again the king obeyed, and again Balaam waited for a divine message from a God who cannot be bought. On these peaks a sorcerer had arrived to destroy, but in the presence of the Almighty, even a greedy prophet could speak only truth. Human ego wanted control, but God's voice decreed grace. The tribe he chose to defend would stay safe, and no curse, no magic, and no king could alter that destiny. When the prophet saw that God truly desired to bless Israel, he stopped searching for signs, omens, or dark magic. Instead, he turned his gaze out toward the quiet wilderness. Watching the tribes of Israel resting peacefully below the Spirit of God suddenly seized his mind. In that moment, he spoke with raw divine force. He called himself the man who hears the whispers of God, who sees visions from the Creator falling to the ground, with eyes wide open to eternity. Looking down at the peaceful order of their camps, he was filled with wonder, crying out how beautiful Jacob's tents were, how perfect their homes, stretching out like green valleys, like lush gardens beside a rushing river. He compared them to like aloes planted by Yahweh, or great cedars standing firm beside rushing waters. Balaam spoke of Israel's unfolding destiny, how their waters would spill from brimming buckets and their seed be richly nourished. With a king rising far higher than Agag, his domain, exalted in absolute power, Balaam spoke on as the Spirit gripped him, declaring that El, who rescued Israel out of Egypt, gave them the wild, untamed fury of a bull. They would consume enemy nations, shatter their bones, and pierce them with arrows. Like a lion they crouch, in silent power, resting in deep confidence where no one dares to disturb them. He finished with a solemn decree that those who bless Israel are blessed, and those who curse them are cursed. Hearing this, Balak exploded in sudden rage. He slammed his hands together in fury, bitterly lashing out at Balaam, accusing him of betraying the very reason he was brought here. Instead of placing a curse, Balaam had blessed them 3 times. Balak ordered him to pack up and go home, saying he had planned to reward him richly. But Yahweh had kept him from receiving any honor. Balaam calmly reminded him that he had already warned the king's messengers. He could never defy the word of Yahweh in things big or small. Even if Balak offered him a house filled with silver and gold, he could never speak against his Lord's command. Yet, before leaving, the prophet offered to reveal what Israel would do to Balak's people in days to come. Then he delivered another prophecy, speaking once more as the man whose eyes had been opened, who hears the words of El and holds the knowledge of the Most High. Falling down in awe, with unveiled eyes, he declared that he saw someone coming, not in his own day, but far off, destined to emerge when the time was right. He spoke of this future figure as a rising star, out of Jacob a scepter rising from Israel. This ruler would crush the borders of Moab with piercing, might conquering the forces of chaos. Edom and Seir would fall, becoming Israel's own land. As the nation triumphed, and the conqueror from Jacob wiped out the remnants of enemy strongholds. Turning his gaze toward Amalek, Balaam declared that though they had been first among nations, their end would be total ruin. Seeing the Kenites, he cried that though their sanctuary was strong and their nest perched safely high in the cliffs, they would still be consumed, carried off as captives by Asher. With one last haunting cry, Balaam asked who could survive when El unleashes such terrifying judgment. He foresaw warships sailing from Kittim to crush Asher and Eber, but those invaders would also meet their doom in the end. Having spoken only what Yahweh commanded, Balaam stood up and went back to his home, while Balak, his dark plans shattered, walked away defeated. Yet while Israel camped at Shittim, the people began to lose themselves, falling into immorality with women of Moab. These strangers lured them to join in sacrifices to local gods, and Israel readily accepted. They feasted on the offerings and bowed down before these strange idols. In doing this, Israel bound themselves to Baal of Peor, and the anger of Yahweh burned fiercely against his people. Yahweh ordered Moses to take the tribal leaders and put them to death in broad daylight before him to turn away his blazing fury from the camp. Moses then commanded the judges of Israel to execute every single man who had bound himself to Baal of Peor. Right as this judgment was falling, an Israelite defiantly marched in right before Moses and the weeping crowd, leading a Midianite woman straight into his family tent. This occurred while the congregation was weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, witnessed this outrage, he stood up from the crowd. Grabbing a heavy spear, he chased the man into his tent and plunged the blade through both of them, the Israelite man and the foreign woman, piercing her straight through the body. Instantly, what stays the hand of judgment? Finally, the plague halted, but 24,000 lay dead, already fallen to the disease. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, praising Phinehas because he carried the very fire of Yahweh, turning absolute wrath away from a broken people. Yahweh declared he spared the entire nation from total destruction in his burning fury. For this he granted Phinehas a sacred covenant of peace, a promise reaching across generations to come, a bond of an eternal priesthood because he burned with passion for his God, healing the rift for the children of Israel. The slain Israelite man struck down with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, a high leader from the tribe of Simeon. The foreign woman was Cosbi, daughter of Zur, who ruled a powerful clan in Midian. Then Yahweh spoke once more to Moses, commanding him to wage war against the Midianites and crush them. For they used deadly deception against the people at Peor, using the seductive trap of Cosby to ruin them. Their own kinswoman slain on the tragic day the plague struck because of Peor. Once the deadly plague had finally subsided, Yahweh spoke to Moses and Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest. He ordered them to register the entire congregation, Israel counting every man 20 years and older, all those fit to serve in the army, recording them by their ancestral houses. And so Moses and the priest Eleazar assembled the tribes on the plains of Moab beside the Jordan opposite Jericho to number the souls, just as Yahweh had commanded. The children of Israel, rescued from Egypt, must now face a new spiritual reckoning. First came Reuben, Israel's firstborn, whose sons founded the clans of Enoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. These Reubenite clans numbered 43,730 men. From this line came Eliab, father to Nemuel, Dathan, and Abiram. These last brothers became infamous for inciting the tragic revolt against Moses and Aaron, defying the sacred order and rebelling against Yahweh himself. The earth ripped open and swallowed them whole, alongside Korah, in a terrifying judgment of fire that consumed 250 rebels, serving as a warning sign to all. Yet mercy spared Korah's sons. Next came Simeon, whose lineage descended from Nemuel, Jamin, Jachin, Zerah, and Saul, totaling 22,200 men. Next rose the tribe of Gad. From Zephon, Hagi, Shuni, Ozni, Eri, Arad, and Areli descended their clans, counting 40,500 strong. Then Judah, whose firstborn sons and Onan had already perished in Canaan. The surviving lineage of Judah continued through Shelah, Perez, and Zerah, with Perez fathering Hezron and Hamul. This mighty tribe of Judah mustered 76,500. Issachar was represented by Tola, Pua, Jashub, and Shimron, counting 64,300. The sons of Zebulun were numbered through Sered, Elon, and Jalil, totaling 60,500. The dual nature of Joseph divided into Manasseh and Ephraim. The line of Manasseh began with Machir, the father of Gilead, from whom arose a new generation: Yezer, Helek, Asriel, Shechem, Shemidah, and Hefer. But Hefer's son, Zelophehad, left no sons, only 5 daughters: Mala, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Manasseh's clans mustered 52,700. Meanwhile, Ephraim established the houses of Shuthelah, Becher, and Tahan, with Shuthelah fathering Eran, founder of his own clan. These were the sons of Shuthelah, down to the lineage of Eran. As the registry of Ephraim continued, the total strength of their clans stood at 32,500. This completes the houses of Joseph recorded by clan. Finally arose the tribe of Benjamin, through Bela, Ashbel, and Ahiram, Shupham, and Hupham. Even Bela's sons, Ard and Naaman, had to be counted in this spiritual inventory. Why count forgotten names to build Benjamin's broken clans, the Ardites and Namites? 45,600 souls. Then came Dan, carrying only a single recorded name, Shuham, the sole heir who birthed a dynasty. From this one seed, Dan's lineage grew and multiplied into 64,400 restless souls. Next came Asher's sons Imnah, Ishvi, and Beriah, whose own line eventually bore Heber and Malchiel. Asher also had a daughter, Sarah, a rare name lighting up these ancient clans, 53,400 strong. Then Naphtali's sons, Jaziel, Guni, Jezer, and Shalem, each fathering a unique clan. The final tally of Naphtali's bloodline reached 45,400. Here stood the entire nation, excluding the Levites, 601,730 men facing the unknown. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses. The sacred land must be carved up, divided among them according to the number of names in each tribe. A simple law: the larger the tribe, the bigger their inheritance; the smaller the share. Yet this great inheritance would not depend on mere numbers. Each territory was assigned by sacred lot matched perfectly in accordance with the names of their ancestral clans. This blind lottery ruled the powerful and the weak alike. The Levites stood apart, numbered by their sacred houses: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. From them rose Libnites, Hebronites, Malites, Mushites, and Korahites. Within Kohath, a father named Amram arose. His wife Jochebed, born of Levi during the dark Egyptian exile, bore 3 children: Aaron, Moses, and their sister Miriam. Aaron's own sons were Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. But Nadab and Abihu perished, consumed for offering strange, unauthorized fire before Yahweh. The male Levites from a month old and up numbered 23,000. They were excluded from the main census. Their inheritance was not physical soil, but something far deeper among their brothers. Moses and Eleazar the priest conducted this vast counting, cataloging the weary souls of Israel on the plains of Moab beside the Jordan facing Jericho. But look closely at this new generation. Not a single soul survived from the first census taken by Moses and Aaron in the wilderness of Sinai. The divine decree was absolute. That entire generation of fear had to die in the desert. And so it was. Only 2 survivors remained: Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. Then Zelophehad's daughters, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, stepped forward from the shadows. They traced their blood through Heifer-Gilead and Machir back to Manasseh of the tribe of Joseph. These brave women approached Moses, Eleazar the priest, the tribal leaders, and the entire assembly at the threshold of the tent of appointment, presenting their case. Our father died in the dry desert, they argued. He never joined those rebels who stood against Yahweh during Korah's uprising. He died for his own human failings, leaving behind no sons. Why should our father's legacy be erased just because he had no male heir? Grant us an inheritance alongside our uncles. So Moses brought their plea directly before Yahweh, and the divine voice answered clearly. Zelophehad's daughters speak the absolute truth. Give them a permanent piece of land among their father's brothers and pass their father's legacy directly to them. This sparked a permanent law for all Israel. If a man dies without a son, his land belongs to his daughter. If she does not exist, the property passes directly to his brothers. If there are no brothers, hand it over to his father's brothers. And if his father had no brothers, then let the legacy go to the closest living relative in his clan. This shall stand as a decree of judgment for all Israel by my divine command. Then Yahweh whispered to Moses, "Climb up into the Nuv, Abarim mountains. Stand on the peak and gaze at the inheritance promised to the children of Israel. Once you have seen it, you too will be gathered to your people, just as Aaron, your... What if your worst failure defined you? Like your brother Aaron in the barren Zin desert, you disobeyed my command, failing to reveal my holiness before their eyes at the waters of Meribah." Confronting his mortality, Moses turned to Yahweh and pleaded, "Let the Lord, the divine breath inside all humanity, appoint a shepherd to guide this restless, searching crowd, someone to guide their dark trials and lead them safely home so the Creator's own people will not wander lost in their own exile." And Yahweh answered, "Appoint Joshua, son of Nun, a man carrying the divine spark. Pass your mantle to him before Eleazar, the priest, and the entire assembly. Commission him openly before them and bestow your heavy mantle of spiritual authority so the anxious wandering tribes of Israel will listen and follow. He must stand before Eleazar, who will seek divine direction through the mysterious stones of the Urim. By his command they shall venture into the dark, and by his word return safely he and the whole wandering nation." Moses did exactly as commanded, taking Joshua to stand before the high priest and the entire silent community. He laid hands on him, passing the flame of leadership, just as Yahweh had spoken. Then Yahweh spoke, offering an ancient map to anchor the drifting souls of Israel through ritual and sacrifice. "Command the people," he said, "and tell them, my offerings, my food, consumed by fire, a sweet, soothing aroma to me. You must be vigilant to present at the sacred appointed times. Every day, sacrifice 2 unblemished young lambs to align your days, one to greet the dawn, the other to quiet the twilight. Beside each lamb, bring a sacred grain offering, fine flour, 1/10 of an ephah, mixed with pure pressed oil. This daily ritual of ascent was first established at Mount Sinai as a soothing aroma to the Lord, a sacred fire. With every lamb, pour a quarter hin of fine wine inside the holy place as a libation. The second lamb, sacrificed at dusk, must be prepared the exact same way, with its grain and wine, an offering of fire sweet to the Lord. And on the quiet Sabbath, double the offering. Present 2 perfect year-old male lambs, along with a double portion of choice flour mixed with oil for the grain offering and its matching wine. This Sabbath tribute is made week after week beyond the daily cycle of sacrifice. And with every new moon, a larger, more solemn offering must be presented. 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 unblemished young lambs. Each young bull is paired with a grain offering of 3/10 of fine flour mixed with oil, the ram with 2/10 and each lamb with 1/10. With these, you must pour half a hin of wine for every bull, 1/3 of a hin for the ram, and 1/4 for each lamb. This monthly ritual of fire will track the passage of your entire year. Also, bring 1 male goat as a sin offering to cleanse your guilt beside the standard daily sacrifice and its drink offering. On the 14th day of the first month, celebrate the Passover. On the 15th day begins the week-long feast of unleavened bread, a journey of purging where no yeast is eaten. This first day must be a sacred gathering of souls, a time when all heavy labor completely stops. On this day, bring a major sacrifice, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 perfect year-old lambs as a tribute. Accompany them with grain offerings, 3/10 of fine flour and oil. For each bull, 2/10 for the ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs. You must also offer a male goat to carry your guilt and find atonement. Repeat these solemn rituals every single day throughout the entire week of the festival, besides the daily offering. On this final day, rest reminding us that our ancient search for peace continues. Why did the ancients halt their daily labor? They gathered in silence, seeking a sacred space. Weeks later came the day of first fruits, a moment of offering the very first harvest. A new grain offering was presented to Yahweh, calling the community into another sacred assembly. All heavy labor ceased. In the silence, they prepared 2 young bulls and a single ram. 7 flawless year-old male lambs were chosen, accompanied by precise portions of sacred grain. Fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah per bull, and 2/10 for the ram, plus 1/10 for every lamb. They also brought a male goat, a sacrifice for human sin. This ritual covered their collective guilt, presented alongside the daily burnt offering and its essential grain. Every single animal had to be completely flawless, poured out alongside their sacred drink offerings. When the 7th month arrived on its very first day, Israel gathered for a quiet assembly. No work was permitted. Instead, the heavy silence was pierced by the sudden blast of trumpets. Through the smoke, they brought a deep sacrifice of fire, rising toward the heavens. It offered a soothing, pleasing aroma to Yahweh. 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7-year-old lambs, all perfect without spot. They paired them with fine flour and pure oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs. Then a single male goat was sacrificed as a sin offering for atonement. These special rituals stood alongside the regular monthly and daily burnt offerings. Each had its grain and drink offerings, a precise fire offering to Yahweh. 10 days later, the Day of Atonement arrived, the most intense sacred assembly of the year. The people humbled their very souls, stopping all work to face their deepest internal shadows. They offered 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 pristine year-old lambs in the fire. They prepared matching grain offerings and also chose a single male goat for the altar. This served as the sin offering layered upon the daily sacrifices of cleansing and restoration, along with their grain and liquid offerings. Then on the 15th day, everything changed. The Feast of Tabernacles began a 7-day journey of memory and faith to Yahweh. A sacred gathering commenced, and all daily labor was strictly forbidden. The fire was lit. The first day demanded a massive sacrifice: 13 young bulls, 2 rams, and more. 14 perfect-year-old male lambs were carefully offered, paired with grain mixed with pure oil. 3/10 for every bull, 2/10 for each ram, and 1/10 per lamb. A single male goat was sacrificed as a sin offering, added to the constant daily ritual, together with its regular grain and drink. Each day of this festival mirrored the last, but the number of bulls slowly decreased. On day 2, 12 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. On day 3, 11 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. Day 4 brought 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. Day 5, 9 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. On day 6, 8 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. Finally, on day 7, 7 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, and 1 goat. Every single daily sacrifice required its matching portion of grain and fine flour, and drink offerings carefully measured for each animal. These were always offered in addition to the standard daily burnt offering and its own grain and drink. On the 8th day, the feast ended in solemn silence. No labor was permitted. A final series of sacred sacrifices was offered: 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 pristine-year-old lambs, complete with their prescribed grain and drink offerings. A single male goat was sacrificed as a final sin offering layered upon the regular daily burnt sacrifices. These rituals were presented to Yahweh at their exact times, a map of human devotion, alongside their personal vows and voluntary offerings, whether burnt offerings or grain. Why do we sacrifice? To ease our guilt. Moses delivered these ancient rules of offerings to the wandering tribes of Israel, carrying the weight of divine commands. Then Moses summoned the tribal elders, men who carried the community's destiny, laying bare the terrifying weight of their promises, the law of vows and sacred oaths. If a man swore a deep oath to God, binding his soul with a heavy promise, there was no turning back. His spoken words became his destiny, and he had to fulfill them. But for a young woman still living under the shadow of her father's roof, if she swore a vow or made a binding promise, and her father heard of it but chose to stay silent, her word stood, and her commitment was locked. But if her father objected the very day he found out about it, the promise was broken, and God released her, recognizing her father had stepped in to nullify it. If she was soon to be married, carrying a heavy oath she made before entering her new home, and her new husband heard her vow, but chose to say absolutely nothing, the vow was set in stone. But if he objected the moment he heard of it, he could erase her promise, and God would forgive her. Yet for widows or women who were divorced, every single vow they made and every oath they took remained absolutely unbreakable. There was no father or husband to erase their choices. But if a married woman made a vow or bound herself to an oath within her husband's home, and he heard it and raised no objection, then the promise stood. If he kept silent day after day, his quiet agreement sealed her fate, binding her completely. But if the husband later changed his mind and tried to break those vows, after staying silent, the weight of that broken promise fell entirely on his own shoulders. He bore the consequences. Whether she swore to deny herself or bound her soul, it was the husband's choice to validate or erase it. These were the boundaries God established through Moses, drawing the invisible psychological lines between a husband and his wife, and a father and his young daughter while she still lived under his protective roof. Then God commanded Moses to wage war against the Midianites for leading the people astray in the shameful worship of Peor. God warned him that after this final act, Moses would be gathered to his people. He then ordered each tribe to send 1,000 chosen men, raising a deadly militia, force of 12,000 soldiers to execute divine vengeance on Midian. Leading them was Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, who carried the sacred temple vessels and the trumpets of war. The army marched, striking Midian exactly as God had ordered Moses. They slaughtered every man, including the 5 kings of Midian and also the rogue prophet Balaam, son of Beor, the mastermind who had seduced Israel. Yet they spared and captured the Midianite women and children, plundering their vast herds, taking everything and burning their settlements to the ground. They dragged the entire spoil, the captives' herds, and treasure back to Moses, Eleazar, and the press. Entire community waiting in the dusty plains of Moab, just across the Jordan from Jericho. As the victorious army approached, the elders went out to welcome them. But Moses was furious, burning with anger at the commanders of thousands and hundreds. He demanded to know why they spared the women, reminding them that these very women were the temptresses who, following Balaam's dark advice, had triggered the severe spiritual rot and the deadly plague that struck the nation. Moses issued a terrifying decree: kill every male child and every woman who had known intimacy. Only the young, untouched girls were allowed to be spared from death. Moses ordered the blood-stained soldiers to stay outside the camp for 7 days to purify themselves, their captives on day 3 and 7. Every garment, leather piece, and goat's hair, wooden object had to be cleansed. Eleazar then gave the rules for purifying metal objects. Gold, silver, copper, iron, tin, and lead had to pass through fire, as we must, to be healed. Can water wash away what fire cannot touch? The ritual cleansing began, purified by water alone. On the 7th day, they washed their clothes, clean at last, to step back into the camp. Then Yahweh ordered a census of the entire spoils of war, captives, and beasts, to divide them evenly between the soldiers and those left behind. A quiet sacrifice was demanded from the soldiers. 1 out of every 500 captives and beasts was set apart for Yahweh, given to Eleazar the priest. From the people's share, 1 out of every 50 went straight to the Levites, who guarded the sacred tabernacle. Moses and Eleazar did exactly as Yahweh commanded: 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 virgin women. The soldiers' half included 337,500 sheep, with 675 yielded to Yahweh, 36,000 cattle giving 72, and 30,500 donkeys yielding 61, and 16,000 young women with 32 given over. Moses then gave this heavy tribute to Eleazar as Yahweh's offering. The congregation's equal portion matched the soldiers' exact count of all their livestock, and 16,000 people. Moses took 1 of every 50 as commanded and gave them to the Levites guarding the sacred tabernacle. Later, the army officers came directly to Moses and reported that not 1 soldier was missing from their ranks. Grateful and relieved, they brought a voluntary offering of gold to Yahweh: armlets, bracelets, and rings, earrings, and pendants to make atonement for their lives. Moses and Eleazar accepted the gold from the officers, totaling 16,750 shekels, distinct from the soldiers' personal plunder. This sacred gold was brought into the tent of meeting as a lasting memorial for Israel before Yahweh. But when the tribes of Reuben and Gad looked upon the fertile lands of Jazer and Gilead, they saw lush pastures, the perfect home for their massive herds of livestock. They came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the elders of the community, naming towns like Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Shebam, and Nebo, and beyond. These rich lands conquered by Yahweh on behalf of the assembly were ideal for raising animals. So they begged to have this territory east of the Jordan as a lasting inheritance, sparing them from crossing the Jordan River with the rest of the nation. Moses confronted them immediately, asking, "Will you sit here while your brothers march to war?" Recalled how their fathers broke Israel's spirit at Kadesh Barnea, refusing to step foot in the land Yahweh promised. That ancient betrayal triggered Yahweh's wrath, condemning an entire generation to wander and die in the desert. He warned these 2 tribes that if they abandoned Yahweh, now they would bring disaster upon the entire nation once more. Quickly, they clarified their actual intentions. They proposed building strong, fortified cities for their children and livestock right here in Gilead. But their warriors would still march, heavily armed at the very front of the invasion to conquer Canaan. They swore not to return to their homes until every single tribe had claimed its rightful territory. They weren't trying to escape the fight. They just wanted their home base, east of the Jordan River when the war ended. Moses accepted this solemn vow, saying that if they kept their promise, crossing over armed to fight until Yahweh defeated his enemies, they would stand blameless before Yahweh and their nation. This coveted land would become their permanent possession. But he added a dark warning: fail to keep this promise, and you sin against Yahweh himself. Rest assured, your sin will find you out. He urged them to build their cities and sheepfolds as planned, and to strictly honor their sacred oath. The tribes of Gad and Reuben agreed, swearing that their families and vast herds. Why must our possessions stay behind in Gilead while our warriors march ahead of the nation? This was the prophet's decree. Moses bound Eleazar the priest and Joshua son of Nun and the tribal elders to this sacred pact. If the clans of Reuben and Gad crossed the Jordan armed to conquer the land, Gilead would be theirs. If they failed, they must settle in Canaan with the others. Yet the sons of Gad and Reuben swore their oath to the divine voice, promising to march onward. They would cross the river armed, even as their true home waited on the eastern banks. Hearing this, Moses solemnly granted to the clans of Gad, Reuben, and half of Manasseh the conquered kingdoms of Sihon, ruler of the Amorites, and Og of Bashan, vast territories of ruined cities and wild valleys. The men of Gad rebuilt fallen cities, raising Dibon, Ataroth, and Aroer, Atroth Shofan, Jazer, Jogbeha, Beth Nimrah, and Beth Haran, all fortified against the wild, guarded with sheepfolds. Meanwhile, Reuben rebuilt ancient Heshbon, Elealeh, Kiriathaim, and Nebo, Baalmeon renaming its pagan altars, and Sibmah changing the identities of these ancient places. Meanwhile, the fierce sons of Machir marched into Gilead, seizing the land, and casting out the resident Amorites. Moses granted this wild territory to Machir. Then Jair, another descendant of Manasseh, claimed the surrounding outposts, naming them the villages of Jair. Noba then seized Kinneth and its outskirts, stamping his own name upon the conquered soil. This is the map of Israel's sacred journey after they escaped. The iron grip of Egypt, marching as a great army led by Moses and Aaron. By divine decree, Moses recorded every step of their journey, marking each departure point of their winding trek. Their escape began at Ramses, setting out on the 15th day of the first month, right after the Passover night. Defiantly, they marched out in plain sight of the weeping Egyptians, who were busy burying their dead firstborn whom Yahweh had struck down, shattering the illusions of their false gods. Leaving Ramses, they camped at Succoth, then reached Etham on the very edge of the wild. Turning back, they headed toward Pi-Hahiroth, near Baal-Zephon, pitching camp before Migdol. Next, they crossed the divided waters into the barren desert, walking for 3 days through the empty wasteland of Etham to rest at Marah. From Marah, they found Elim, an oasis with 12 springs and 70 sheltering palm trees. After Elim, they camped by the Sea of Reeds, then plunged into the desert of Sin, passing Dovka and Alush, reaching Rephidim, where the parched earth offered no water. Next came the sacred wilderness of Sinai, leaving Sinai for Kibroth Hatava, then journeying through Hazeroth, Rithmah, Rimmon, Perez, and Libnah, passing Rissa Kehelatha, Mount Sheper, Harada, Machelath, Tahath, Terah, Mithka, and Hashmona. Then Moseroth, Bene-Jacan, Hor Haggidgad, Jotbatha, Abrona, and Ezion-Geber. They traversed the harsh wilderness of Zin, reaching Paran near Kadesh. Moving on from Kadesh, they climbed Mount Hor, towering on the border of Edom. There Aaron the priest ascended, by divine command, to meet his death. It was the 40th year of their long exile from Egypt, on the first day of the 5th month. Aaron was 123 years old when he died there. In the shadows, the Canaanite king of Arad, watching from the Negev, heard they were coming. Still they marched, leaving Mount Hor for Zalmonah, then Punon Oboth and Aye Abarim at the Twill, borders of Moab, crossing through Dibon-Gad, Almon-Diblathaim, and the misty peaks of Abarim near Nebo. Finally, they descended to the plains of Moab, camping by the Jordan just across from Jericho, stretching from Beth-Jesimoth to Abel-Shittim. There in the plains, the divine voice spoke to Moses once more. When you cross the Jordan into Canaan, you must drive out every soul living there. Smash their stone carvings, melt down their hollow idols, and demolish their pagan altars. Only then will you truly possess this land and make it your home. What if your ultimate inheritance was decided by fate? Cast the sacred lot for your home. Share it among your clans. The greater tribes receive more, while the smaller receive less. Every family must settle where the sacred lot falls, honoring the bloodlines of their ancestors. But beware, if you fail to clear the land, those you allow to remain will haunt you. They will turn into thorns, blinding your eyes, and sharp splinters piercing your very side. They will torment your home, and the destruction I prepared for them will fall on you. Then the divine voice spoke to Moses, delivering a solemn warning for the wandering tribes. This was the sacred soil of Canaan, the destined territory they were meant to inherit. These were the exact borders mapped out for them as they crossed into the unknown. Your southern boundary begins in the desolate wilderness of Zin, tracking the haunted border of Edom. From the dead, silent Salt Sea, the line curves sharply through the steep heights of Akrabim. It cuts across the Zin desert, passing Kadesh Barnea, winding silently toward Hazar Adar. From there, it reaches Asman, where the boundary turns sharply toward the shadowy brook of Egypt, finally meeting its end at the great Mediterranean Sea on your west. This roaring, endless coastline serves as your ultimate western boundary, guarding your home. To define the north, trace a line from the sea up to the towering summit of Mount Hor. It reaches Lebo Hamath, winds through Zadad and Ziphron, stopping finally at isolated Hazar Enan. This seals your northern border. Now draw the eastern frontier, starting from Hazarenan down to Shephem, dropping steeply to Riblah on the eastern side of Ain, sloping down to touch the eastern shore of Lake Chinnereth, tracing the path from there. It runs along the Jordan River, ending in the Dead Sea's salty depths, enclosing your world. This is your promised territory. Moses laid out this map of destiny to the tribes. He announced that 9.5 tribes must claim their homes by the sacred lot. The warriors of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh had already taken their portion. They chose the wild lands east of the Jordan, facing the sunrise near Jericho. Then a divine whisper named the guardians who would oversee the division of this land. Eleazar the high priest and Joshua, son of Nun, would orchestrate this sacred lottery. A single chieftain from every tribe joined them to prevent any shadow of greed. Judah was led by Caleb, Simeon by Samuel, and Benjamin by their chosen man, Eladad, son of Chislon. Dan chose Buki, son of Jogli, and Joseph's son Manasseh appointed Haniel, son of Ephod. Ephraim sent Kimuel, and from Zebulun, their leader, Elizaphan, son of Parnak. Issachar sent Paltiel. Asher selected Ahihud, son of Shelomi, and Naphtali sent Pedahel. These were the architects appointed by the divine to supervise the mapping of Canaan's ancient soil for the children of Israel. As the tribes camped in the shadow of Jericho along the Jordan, a voice spoke. He commanded Moses to secure safe havens, granting the priestly Levites sacred cities of their own, carved directly from the land. But these cities were far more than simple homes. They required a protective space, open pasture lands stretching outward to feed their herds. This sacred green space had to extend 1,000 cubits from the city wall, measure 2,000 cubits on every side east, south, west, and north to establish a holy sanctuary. Out of 48 total cities designated for the priesthood, 6 were set apart as cities of refuge, spiritual safe zones of grace. These sanctuaries guarded anyone who accidentally caused a death, offering mercy and protection. From the fierce avenger of blood until the accused could stand trial in open court. 3 sanctuaries stood east of the Jordan, and 3 on the west awaiting those seeking mercy. Why build safe havens in Canaan and 3 east of the Jordan? They were not just for Israel, but also for the strangers and wanderers among them. Any soul who took a life unintentionally could flee there for mercy. Yet the law drew a sharp, deep line between accidental death and calculated murder. If a killer used a heavy iron tool, a stone, or a wooden weapon meant to destroy, and the victim died, it was deemed murder. If hatred and dark intent drove them even without a weapon, the killer had to face death. The avenging kinsman held the solemn right to execute this justice. But if someone struck another down without malice or intent, perhaps by a falling stone, the community had to judge the tragedy. If cleared of deliberate murder, they were rescued from the avenger and sent back to the safe sanctuary city, living in exile until the death of the high priest. Only then could they safely return to their home. If they wandered outside too soon and the avenger caught them, the avenger was not guilty of shedding blood. These laws stood as an unyielding decree for all generations and in every home. A person could only be condemned to death by the word of multiple witnesses, never by just one voice. No blood money could buy back a cold killer from their death sentence, nor could any ransom buy their way out of exile early. God warned them not to defile the land with unavenged blood. The murder of the innocent poisoned the very soil, and no cleansing could heal that earth except the blood of the one who spilled it. Because God lived in their midst, the land had to stay holy. On the plains of Moab across from Jericho, the tribal elders from the clan of Gilead of the tribe of Manasseh, descendants of Joseph, came before Moses and the rulers of Israel. They brought a deep concern about the inheritance promised to the daughters of Zelophehad. God had commanded that their late father's land go to his daughters, as he left no sons. But the clan leaders worried that if these women married outside their own tribe, their ancestral lands would be permanently lost to another family line. This would shrink their own tribal borders and erase the sacred boundaries drawn by God. They warned that during the year of Jubilee, all property was supposed to return home. But if this land had already passed to another tribe through marriage, it would never come back to the tribe of their ancestors. They feared this would mean a permanent, irreversible loss of their tribal lands and inheritance. So Moses took this heavy question straight to the Lord and received his divine decree. The concern of Joseph's descendants was valid. So God ruled that the daughters of Zelophehad could marry anyone they loved, but only within their own family clan. This ensured their father's inheritance would stay locked within the tribe, preventing lands from bleeding from one tribe into another. Each tribe of Israel had to hold fast to its own allotted territory. This strict law applied to every daughter who claimed land. They had to marry within their father's clan to keep the inheritance secure. And so the daughters of Zelophehad, Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah did exactly as God commanded. They married their cousins within the clan of Manasseh, keeping their family estate right where it belonged. And with that, the laws of boundaries and inheritance were finished. These were the final commandments God handed down to Moses before the people crossed into Canaan. With the borders drawn, the legacy protected, and the rules of justice established, the ancient nation paused on the edge of a promise that still speaks to us today. Is the Bible just ancient history or a spiritual map? Behind them lay the long, rebellious wilderness, its graves, divine fire, and mercy. Before them stretched the land Yahweh had promised their fathers. Moses, the loyal servant of Yahweh, was forbidden to cross over. Yet his final task remained unfinished. Soon he would raise his voice one last time to proclaim the covenant and recall the commandments, preparing their weary hearts to obey. The God who rescued them from Egypt and guided them through the wilderness would now lead them home, not just to physical soil, but to a sacred life where loyalty brought blessing and defiance brought exile. That ancient journey never truly ends. It is the story of Yahweh and his people still echoing today. In the days ahead, the profound words of Moses would reverberate through time, begging us to choose life so that we and our children might truly live. If this touched your soul, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with those you love. Until our next journey together.